The neon glare of Las Vegas was a familiar comfort to Tom Jones. It was 1970, and his star was blazing bright. His shows at Caesar's Palace were legendary, a whirlwind of powerful vocals, hip-shaking moves, and adoring fans. He was the king of the Strip, or at least one of them. The other, of course, was Elvis, the king. Their paths had crossed a few times in the bustling, glittery world of Vegas, a nod here, a friendly word there, but never anything more. They were rivals in the best possible sense, two titans of entertainment, each with their own kingdom. It was late past midnight, after a particularly wild show. Tom was unwinding in his suite, the lingering scent of stale cigar smoke and perfume in the air. He'd kicked off his shoes, loosened his tie, and was about to call it a night when the phone rang. He glanced at the clock. Who on earth would be calling at this hour? His manager, a last-minute requestee, from singing, "Yeah, Mr. Jones?" A smooth, deep voice, calm and polite. "This is Joe Esposito. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Presley." Tom's eyebrows shot up. "Joe Esposito, one of the Memphis Mosito. Mr. Presley would like to invite you for a private visit tonight, if it's not too much trouble. He has something he wishes to discuss with you." The words were formal, almost regal, as if delivering an invitation to a royal court. Tom paused. A private visit with Elvis. Now, his first thought was a dozen questions. Why, what could he possibly want? Las Vegas was full of strange happenings, but this felt different. It felt important. "Tonight?" Tom asked, stalling for time as he tried to process. "It's rather late, Mr. Esposito." "Indeed, Mr. Jones. Mr. Presley finds this hour conducive to discussions. A car will be at your lobby in 20 minutes, should you accept." The voice was firm, leaving little room for negotiation. It wasn't a request as much as an expectation. Tom thought about it. Sleep could wait. Curiosity and a healthy dose of professional respect won out. "All right," he said, a sense of adventure stirring within him. "Tell Mr. Presley I'll be there." He hung up the phone, a strange mix of excitement and unease washing over him. He quickly splashed water on his face, ran a hand through his hair, and threw on a fresh, dark shirt. He didn't want to look like he'd just tumbled out of a bed, even if he almost had. This wasn't a casual meeting. This was Elvis. 20 minutes later, precisely, a sleek black limousine pulled up to the front entrance of Caesar's Palace. It was discreet. No flashing lights or screaming fans, just a quiet symbol of power. Tom stepped out into the cool desert night, the air still buzzing with the city's energy. The driver, a burly man with a polite nod, opened the back door for him. As Tom settled into the plush leather seat, the car glided silently away from the Strip, heading towards the quieter, more exclusive parts of the city. He peered out the tinted windows, trying to guess their destination. Not Graceland, obviously. They were in Vegas. Perhaps one of the grand private estates on the outskirts, or a secluded penthouse. The journey felt surprisingly long, each passing minute building the anticipation. Tom tried to imagine what Elvis might want. A duet? A movie role? Advice? He ran through every scenario in his head, but none of them felt quite right for such a late night. Secretive summons. There was a solemnity to it, a seriousness that hinted at something deeper than showbiz chatter. Finally, the car turned into a long tree-lined driveway, leading to a sprawling single-story ranch-style house set back from the road. It was impressive, but understated, not flashy like some of the other celebrity homes he'd seen. Security guards were visible, but discreet, melting into the shadows. Car pulled up to the front door, and the driver came around to open it. Tom stepped out, feeling the desert night air against his skin. It was quiet here, a stark contrast to the unending roar of the Strip. He could hear crickets chirping, a sound he hadn't noticed in weeks. The front door of the house opened before he even reached it, revealing Joe Esposito, standing tall and imposing in the doorway. "Mr. Jones." Esposito said, his voice as calm as it had been on the phone. "Welcome. Mr. Presley is expecting you." He gestured inside, and Tom, with a nervous flutter in his stomach, stepped across the threshold, leaving a loud, glittering world of Vegas behind, and entering the private world of the king. The air inside felt different somehow, quieter, almost reverent. He had no idea what awaited him, but he knew deep down that this night would be unlike any other. The interior of the house was surprisingly understated, more a comfortable home than a flashy palace. Soft lighting, rich wood, and deep carpets created an atmosphere of quiet luxury. Joe Esposito led Tom down a long hallway, past framed photos and tasteful artwork. Tom tried to read the mood of the house, looking for clues as to why he was here. He heard no music, no laughter, just the soft scuff of their shoes on the carpet. Finally, Esposito stopped at a set of double doors made of dark, polished wood. He knocked softly, then pushed them open. "Mr. Presley," he announced. "Mr. Jones is here." Tom took a deep breath and stepped into the room. It was a large, dimly lit living area, almost a den. A grand piano stood in one corner, and a wall of records and stereo equipment dominated another. In the center of the room, on a plush sofa, sat Elvis Presley. He looked different than Tom had expected. Not the sequined, powerful stage persona, but a more introspective, almost vulnerable figure. Elvis wore dark, comfortable clothing, his famous hair a little tousled. His eyes, though, were what struck Tom most. They were deep, intense, and held a kind of weary thoughtfulness. Elvis rose slowly, a tall, imposing figure even in civilian clothes. He offered a small, polite smile. "Tom," he said, his voice softer than Tom had imagined, a gentle southern drawl. "Thank you for coming. I appreciate you taking the time, especially at this hour." He extended a hand. Tom shook it, feeling the strength in Elvis's grip. "Mr. Presley," he replied, "the pleasure's all mine. It's an honor." He still felt a touch of disbelief standing here face to face with the king in his private world. "Please call me Elvis," he said, gesturing to a comfortable armchair opposite his sofa. "And I'm Tom." They sat, and for a moment an awkward silence hung in the air. Tom waited, knowing Elvis had called him here for a reason. He studied Elvis, trying to gauge his mood. He seemed restless, almost searching for something. "Tom, I apologize for the late-night summons, but there are some things that just don't feel right to talk about in the harsh light of day." He paused as if gathering his thoughts. "I've been listening to a lot of music lately, more than usual, late at night when the world's quiet." Tom nodded. Intrigued, "I understand. The quiet hours can be the most revealing." "Exactly," Elvis said, a spark of understanding in his eyes. "And I've been listening to gospel. A lot of it. Old hymns, spirituals, quartets. There's a truth in it, you know, a purity. Something that just reaches you." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "And I've been listening to your records, Tom, your voice. There's soul there, real soul. You don't just sing the notes, you feel them deep down." Tom felt a flush of pride mixed with surprise. For Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, to praise his soulfulness. It was high praise indeed. "Thank you, Elvis," he said, genuinely touched. "That means a lot coming from you. Your own gospel recordings are incredible." Elvis waved a dismissive hand. "They're all right, but I've been feeling a longing, a need to sing it again. Not for a crowd, not for a record deal, but just for the feeling, for the spirit of it." He looked at Tom, his gaze unwavering. "And I've had this idea, this thought, that if I could sing it with someone who truly understood it, someone with a voice that could match it, that maybe something special could happen." He took a deep breath. "And that someone, Tom, is you. I believe our voices together could create something truly unique, something that might even lift the roof off this place, if you know what I mean." Tom was speechless. He'd expected many things, but not this. An invitation to sing gospel privately with Elvis Presley. It was a staggering request. He was known for his powerful pop hits, his show-stopping performances. Gospel wasn't his usual public arena, though he'd grown up with it in Wales, in church, But to sing it with Elvis, this wasn't about performance, it was about something far more personal. Elvis, Tom began, choosing his words carefully. I'm honored, truly. I grew up singing hymns in chapel. It's deep in my roots, but to sing with you, it's a big step. He wasn't sure if he was worthy of such a collaboration. It felt like stepping into a sacred space. No pressure, Tom. None at all. Just an idea that's been burning inside me. I have some tracks, some of my favorites. We could just listen, see if the feeling takes hold. Now expand what this kind of music can do for a soul. He gestured to the stereo system. What do you say? Just listen for a bit, see where the spirit leads. Tom looked at the king. Really looked at him. He saw a man who wasn't just famous, but who was searching, seeking something beyond the applause and the glitter. And in that moment, Tom knew he had to say yes. This wasn't a business deal. It was an invitation to a spiritual journey. All right, Elvis, Tom said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Let's listen. Elvis smiled, a genuine, relieved smile that softened his features. He reached for a remote control on a small table beside him and pressed a button. Instantly, the rich, warm sound of a gospel choir filled the room. It was an old recording full of raw emotion and powerful harmonies. The singers' voices soared, intertwining, creating a tapestry of faith and hope. Tom leaned back in his chair, letting the music wash over him. It was a familiar sound, a comfort from his childhood, but hearing it here in this setting with Elvis gave it a new depth. Closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to be fully immersed. Elvis, meanwhile, was swaying gently, his eyes closed too. He seemed lost in the music, a peaceful expression on his face. He began to hum along, a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through the room. It wasn't loud, just a quiet, almost subconscious participation. Then, softly, he started to sing the words, his voice a low, melodic murmur blending perfectly with the recording. Tom listened, mesmerized. This was a side of Elvis he'd never seen, never imagined. Not the hip-swiveling showman, but a man seeking solace, finding connection through music that resonated deep within his spirit. Elvis's voice, even in that quiet, personal setting, was unmistakable, rich, soulful, and full of an emotion that went beyond mere performance. He hesitated for a second. This was Elvis. Could he really just jump in? But the music was too strong, the feeling too compelling. Took a breath, and almost unconsciously let his own voice join the chorus, a low, smooth harmony weaving itself around Elvis's deeper tone. It was just a hum at first, then a soft, wordless melody. Elvis's eyes flickered open, and he looked at Tom. There was no surprise, no judgment, only a quiet acknowledgement, a shared understanding. He gave Tom a slight nod, a silent invitation to continue. Encouraged, Tom let his voice open up a little more, finding the counter-melody, the harmony that perfectly complemented Elvis's lead. Their voices, both powerful in their own right, blended with an unexpected grace. It wasn't a competition. It was a communion. The recording faded out, and for a moment only their two voices remained echoing in the quiet room. When the last note hung in the air, a profound silence descended. Elvis looked at Tom, his eyes shining. "See," he whispered, his voice a little hoarse with emotion. "I knew it. There's something there, Tom. Something special." Tom felt a thrill run through him. He'd felt it too. It was more than just good singing. It was a connection of souls, a shared understanding, expressed through sound. He hadn't realized how much he'd needed this pure, unadulterated musical expression, outside the demands of a stage show. "It truly is," Elvis, Tom replied, his voice equally hushed. "It's humbling, humbling," Elvis echoed, nodding. "That's the word. It's not about us, is it? It's about what flows through us, what this music brings out." He paused, then looked at Tom directly. "Are you willing to try? Not just to hum along, but to really sing, just us, No pressure, no audience. Just to see where it takes us. Tom felt a wave of adrenaline, a rush of excitement. This wasn't an everyday opportunity. This was a chance to create something pure and meaningful with one of the greatest voices of their time. The hesitation was gone, replaced by a surge of artistic desire. "Yes," Tom said, his voice firm. "I'm willing. What do you have in mind?" Elvis smiled, a wider, more relaxed smile this time. He got up and walked over to the grand piano. He lifted the lid, revealing the gleaming white and black keys. "I ain't no concert pianist, Tom," he said with a chuckle. "But I can pick out a few chords, and sometimes a guitar feels right too." He looked around the room as if searching for something. "Or maybe we just need our voices, the way it was meant to be before all the instruments in the show business." Tom considered it. The idea of just two voices, raw and unfiltered, was even more appealing. It would be entirely dependent on their connection, on their ability to truly listen and respond to one another. "Just voices, then," Tom suggested. "To start. See how that feels?" Elvis nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Good," Elvis said, taking a deep breath. "Then let's sing it, Tom, and let's see what happens." The stage was set, not for a performance, but for a deeply personal, sacred duet. A comfortable silence settled between them. The previous gospel recording had faded out, leaving only the quiet hum of the house and the faint sounds of the Vegas night outside. Elvis looked at Tom, a question in his eyes, a silent invitation to begin. Tom nodded, taking a breath. "How great thou art," he murmured almost to himself, letting the words rend. It was a hymn that had accompanied him through childhood, through moments of joy and sorrow in the chapels of his native Wales. Powerful message of wonder at creation and faith, felt particularly fitting for this unexpected late-night encounter. Elvis closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, a deep concentration in his gaze. He began softly, almost a whisper, the opening lines of the hymn. "O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made." His voice, even in that subdued tone, was instantly recognizable. Rich, resonant, full of a deep, unshakable faith. It wasn't the Elvis of Hound Dog or Jailhouse Rock. This was the Elvis who had recorded Crying in the Chapel, the one who found solace and expression in sacred music. His phrasing was gentle, giving each word its weight, its meaning. Tom listened, absorbing the beauty of it. He felt the familiar melody stir within him. When Elvis reached the end of the first line, Tom subtly joined in a smooth, slightly higher harmony that wove itself around Elvis's lead. "I see the stars, I hear the mighty thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed." Their voices, distinct yet complementary, blended in a way that sent shivers down Tom's spine. Elvis's natural baritone grounded the melody, while Tom's powerful tenor lifted it, adding a shimmering quality. There was no grandstanding, no attempt to outshine the other. It was pure collaboration, a respectful weaving of two great instruments. They continued through the first verse, building slightly in volume, finding their rhythm, their shared breath. It was as if they had sung together for years, so natural was the blending. When they reached the chorus, they both seemed to instinctively swell with emotion. "Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art." The words exploded with power, filling the room not with loudness but with an immense palpable feeling of awe. Tom felt his chest expand, his diaphragm working, letting his voice soar, but always in perfect harmony with Elvis. Elvis, too, was giving it his all, his voice reaching its famous thrilling peak, full of passion and conviction. The sound was incredible. It wasn't just two famous singers. It was two souls connecting on a spiritual plane through shared worship. Tom felt a surge of energy, a profound sense of rightness. This was what his voice was made for, this deep, soul-stirring music. They moved into the second verse, then the third, each one building on the last. There were no instruments, just their voices, pure and unadorned. They took turns leading, improvising, slight variations, always finding their way back to a perfect, effortless harmony. Sometimes one would take the melody and the other would float above or below, creating a rich tapestry of sound. Elvis, who had started sitting, now leaned forward, his eyes closed again, lost in the music. His body swayed with the rhythm, his hands occasionally rising in a gesture of expression. Tom felt the same pull, his own body responding to the music, his eyes fixed on some distant point, lost in the emotion. When they reached the end of the final chorus, the last "How great thou art" resonated, lingered in the air, then slowly faded. In the silence, the room was still. The only sounds were their slightly ragged breaths. Both men were exhilarated, a little breathless, but completely fulfilled. He looked at Tom, a wide, almost childlike smile spreading across his face. "Tom," he breathed, his voice full of wonder, "did you feel that? Man, that was something else." Tom nodded, unable to articulate the depth of what he'd just experienced. "I felt it, Elvis. It was truly special." "A blessing indeed," Elvis agreed. He looked towards the stereo system, then back at Tom. "You know, Joe set up some recording gear earlier, just a little something. I wanted to capture it if the feeling was right." He gestured vaguely to a small discreet microphone set up on a stand in the corner of the room, barely noticeable. "I had a hunch." Tom's eyes widened. A recording of this, the thought sent another shiver down his spine. This wasn't just a private moment. It was being preserved. "He just kept it running," Elvis added, almost as if reading Tom's mind. "No pressure. Just for posterity, maybe." He paused, then looked at Tom with renewed energy. "So, one down. What do you say? We try another? I got a whole lot of soul left to sing tonight, Tom, and I got a feeling you do too." Tom grinned. The hesitations, the questions, the star-struck awe, it had all melted away, replaced by the sheer joy of creating music. "Lead the way, Elvis," Tom said, his voice filled with newfound excitement. "Let's sing." As the hours drifted on, the initial formality and the awe of the meeting melted away completely. Tom and Elvis were no longer Tom Jones and Elvis Presley, superstars, but simply two men sharing a profound connection through music. The room became their sanctuary, a place where their vulnerabilities and their strengths intertwined in song. They moved from one gospel hymn to another, each choice seemingly intuitive, flowing naturally from the last. Sometimes Elvis would hum a few bars and Tom would instantly pick up the melody. Other times Tom would suggest a hymn from his own Welsh upbringing, and Elvis, ever curious and open, would listen intently, then find his place within the tune. They sang Amazing Grace, their voices weaving a tapestry of redemption and hope. Elvis's rich baritone providing a steady foundation, while Tom's tenor soared with effortless power. They tackled spirited spirituals, their voices taking on a rhythmic, almost percussive quality, full of joy and raw emotion. They sang slower, more contemplative hymns, their voices imbued with a tender reverence that brought a stillness to the room. The presence of the discreet microphone was forgotten. It was simply there, silently capturing every note, every breath, every nuance of their voices. The sound engineers who had set it up and then retired to a separate soundproofed room to monitor were, unbeknownst to Tom and Elvis, utterly spellbound. They had worked with the best, but they had never heard anything like this. This wasn't just singing. It was spiritual communion. As they sang, their movements became more fluid, more expressive. Elvis no longer just swaying would sometimes rise to his feet, walking around the room gesturing with his hands as if conducting an invisible choir. Tom, too, found himself moving his body, responding instinctively to the ebb and flow of the music, sometimes leaning into a note, sometimes pulling back to let Elvis's voice take the lead. They found a dynamic that was thrilling. Sometimes one would start a line and the other would complete it or echo it, or improvise a spontaneous harmony. They pushed each other, not in a competitive way, but in a way that drew out the very best, the deepest emotion, the most resonant power in each other's voices. There were moments when their voices blended so perfectly, so palm, that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. It was just sound pure and magnificent. They discovered a shared understanding of the music's power, its ability to transcend the mundane, to touch something ancient and sacred within them. They spoke the same musical language, a language of faith and feeling that went beyond words. Time lost all meaning. The glow of the city outside the windows faded as the stars began to dim, but they didn't notice. Their focus was entirely on the music, on the intricate dance of their voices, on the emotion pouring out of them. They fed off each other's energy, one song flowing into the next without a conscious break. A quiet humor occasionally broke through the intensity. After a particularly spirited rendition of a gospel quartet number, Elvis might chuckle, shaking his head. "Man, that felt good, like we were in a small country church, raising the roof." Tom would grin, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "Exactly. All we need are some tambourines and a congregation." But then the music would call to them again, and they would dive back in their faces once more, etched with concentration and passion. They sang about redemption, about joy, about the promise of eternal life. They sang about struggles and triumphs, about the everyday search for meaning. For Elvis, it seemed to be a release, a way to express emotions he couldn't put into words, a solace from the immense pressures of his life. For Tom, it was a rediscovery, a return to the roots of his musical soul, a chance to shed the showman persona and simply be a singer, a worshiper. As the pre-dawn light began to faintly touch the sky outside, a new energy infused their singing. It wasn't weariness, but an almost spiritual fatigue, a deep satisfaction that came from hours of intense, soul-bearing expression. They were physically tired, but spiritually invigorated. They had gone beyond performing. They had entered a realm where the music itself was the master, guiding their voices, shaping their emotions. They were truly losing themselves, becoming conduits for something much larger and more powerful than themselves. And with every note, the Holy Grail, recording, unseen and unheard, by them, grew richer, more profound, a testament to a night of pure, unadulterated musical magic. As the night wore on, a profound shift occurred in the room. What began as a musical collaboration between two legends evolved into something far deeper, something almost mystical. The air itself seemed to thicken with impalpable energy, an unspoken presence that permeated every note they sang. It was more than just good singing. It was as if the very spirit of the gospel, the Holy Ghost, as Elvis might have called it, had descended upon them. Their voices, already powerful, seemed to draw from an inexhaustible wellspring of emotion and conviction. They were no longer thinking about harmonies or phrasing. It was intuitive, driven by an unseen force. Each note felt charged with spiritual significance. When Elvis would hit a particularly soaring high note or delve into a raw guttural low, Tom would respond with an equally passionate burst of sound, his own voice reaching new heights of expressiveness. They pushed each other, not towards competition, but towards transcendence. Goosebumps became a constant companion. Tom found the hair on his arm standing on end, a prickling sensation that ran down his spine. He looked at Elvis and saw the same intensity in his eyes, the same rapt, almost trance-like focus. Their faces were flushed, their brows beaded with sweat, but they showed no sign of stopping. The music had taken hold, possessing them entirely. They sang a powerful rhythmic spiritual, and suddenly Elvis was on his feet, clapping his hands in time, a joyful, almost ecstatic expression on his face. He began to move, a subtle but unmistakable sway of his hips, reminiscent of his stage persona, but entirely unself-conscious, furled by the music's rhythm, rather than a desire to entertain. Tom, too, found himself moving, tapping his foot, his shoulders swaying, feeling the irresistible beat of the song. Then, during a particularly heartfelt ballad about redemption, tears welled in Elvis's eyes, tracing paths down his cheeks. He wasn't weeping from sadness, but from the overwhelming emotion of the song, the raw truth of its message. Tom felt his own throat tighten, a lump forming as he watched the king, stripped bare of his usual bravado, openly vulnerable to the power of the music. It was a moment of profound intimacy, a shared emotional release. They sang of trials and tribulations, of finding strength and faith, of the promise of heaven. Each word they sang was infused with their own life experiences, their own struggles and hopes. The songs became prayers, confessions, declarations. At one point, Elvis leaned back, head thrown slightly back. His eyes closed and unleashed a long, sustained note that seemed to hang in the air indefinitely, trembling with passion. Tom, without missing a beat, wove a perfectly harmonized line beneath it, creating a chord so rich, so full, that it felt like it vibrated in their very souls. It was pure magic, an almost telepathic understanding between them. The engineers in the control room, though unseen, were witnessing something extraordinary. They had to fight the urge to just stop everything and listen, to simply be present in the moment rather than focused on recording levels. They knew instinctively that this was a once-in-a-lifetime event, a moment of unrepeatable brilliance. Tapes were rolling, capturing every single glorious second. This wasn't just a session, it was an outpouring. They continued to sing, unaware of the time, unaware of anything beyond the music. The boundaries between singer and song, between spiritual and physical, blurred and dissolved. They were fully immersed, riding the wave of sound, letting the spirit guide their voices. There were moments of call and response where Elvis would sing a line and Tom would answer, their voices chasing each other, building to a thrilling climax. Then they would pull back, their voices intertwining in a delicate, hushed harmony. A moment of quiet reverence before exploding into another powerful chorus. The exhaustion that should have been setting in after hours of intense vocal work was nowhere to be found. Instead, they felt an almost supernatural energy sustaining them, propelling them forward. The music was a living entity in the room, moving through them, using them as its vessels. The very air in the room seemed to crackle with this energy. It was a testament to the power of their voices, yes, but also to the profound spiritual connection. They had found a connection that went beyond fame, beyond performance, straight to the heart of what it meant to sing with absolute conviction and soul. They were in the zone, lost in the grace and power of the Holy Ghost, and they had no desire to leave. As the deepest hour of night slowly began to wane, a natural lull finally settled over the room. The last notes of a particularly stirring hymn faded, leaving behind an exquisite silence. Both men remained still for a moment, their chests heaving slightly, bathed in the afterglow of their profound musical journey. Elvis was the first to stir. He walked over to a small side table where a pitcher of water and some glasses sat. He poured two, offering one to Tom. "Man, I needed that," he said, his voice a little rough, but with a deep satisfaction. Tom took the glass, his hand trembling slightly. He drank deeply the cool water, a welcome relief to his parched throat. "Me too, Elvis," he replied, his own voice equally hoarse. "That was quite something." They sat back down, not on the sofa and armchair from earlier, but closer now, on matching padded chairs facing each other. The intensity of the singing had created a new kind of intimacy between them. "You know," Elvis began, his gaze thoughtful, "I don't usually talk much about this kind of stuff. Not with many people, but tonight it felt different. It felt right." Tom nodded, understanding. "Did. The music broke down a lot of barriers, didn't it?" "It always does when it's real." "Real?" Elvis echoed. "That's it. So much of what we do, it's a show, a performance, and that's fine. It's what the people want, but this," he gestured vaguely around the room to the lingering resonance of their combined voices. "This is different. This is for us, for the spirit." Tom leaned forward slightly. "It's funny, you know," he confessed. "Growing up in Wales, in chapels singing these hymns, was just part of life." You didn't think about it. It just is. And it's all about the next hit, the next big stage. You forget sometimes what the pure joy of singing really is. Amen to that, Elvis said, a knowing look in his eyes. Sometimes the brighter the lights, the harder it is to see the light, you know. He chuckled. A soft, weary sound. I get tired, Tom. Tired of the demands, the expectations, the crowds. Don't get me wrong. I love my fans, but sometimes a man just needs to sing from his soul without anyone watching, just for God and for himself. It's a heavy crown you wear, Elvis, Tom said quietly, acknowledging the immense pressure that came with being. The King Elvis sighed. It truly is. Sometimes it feels like I'm not wearing it, it's wearing me. He looked at Tom. But tonight it felt lighter, like I could just breathe. Comfortable silence fell between them again, this one filled with understanding rather than awkwardness. They were talking about fame or money or contracts. They were talking about the human condition, about the search for meaning, about the simple act of finding solace in something greater than themselves. Do you ever feel that way? Elvis asked, breaking the silence. Like you need to escape, just for a little while from all of it. Constantly, Tom admitted. The road, the hotels, the schedule. It takes its toll. Your voice. It's a gift, but it's also a tool. And sometimes you just want to use it for yourself, for release, not for work. Elvis nodded slowly. That's exactly it. And there's something about gospel that just cuts through all the noise, gets right to the heart of things. It's the only music that makes me feel truly whole, truly connected. It's the truth in it, Tom agreed. It's not trying to be anything it isn't. Just honest emotion, honest faith. They sat in companionable silence for a few more minutes. The quiet broken only by the distant faint chirping of crickets outside. The sky was beginning to show a faint hint of gray, a subtle lightening at the edges of the horizon. Dawn was approaching, slowly but surely. Elvis stood up, stretching his long frame. He walked over to a window and peered out. Looks like morning's on its way, he murmured, almost reluctantly. He turned back to Tom, a renewed energy in his eyes, but also a hint of something else. A quiet determination. We got a little bit more time, Tom. Just a little more. You think we got one more big one in us to send the night out? Tom felt a surge of energy, despite his tiredness. He looked at Elvis, seeing not the weary king, but the passionate artist, the man who yearned for connection and spiritual expression. He knew without a doubt that he could give him one more. I think we do, Elvis, Tom said, pushing himself to his feet. I think we absolutely do. The first faint blush of dawn was just beginning to paint the sky outside the windows, casting a soft, ethereal glow into the room. It was a gentle reminder that the night was nearing its end, but for Tom and Elvis, it seemed to serve as a call to one last magnificent outpouring of psalm. Guided by their shared vulnerability and the quiet comfort of their conversation, they stood facing each other, a silent agreement passing between them. This was it, the grand finale. Elvis reached for his acoustic guitar, which had been leaning against a wall, mostly forgotten until now. Cradled it for a moment, then strummed a few gentle chords. The sound was warm, resonant, adding a new layer to their purely vocal performance. He looked at Tom. You know this one, Tom? He asked, and began a slow, deliberate strum of the opening to Peace in the Valley. Tom's eyes lit up. Peace in the Valley, he echoed. It was a classic, a powerful hymn of solace and hope, perfectly suited for the fading night and the promise of a new day. Elvis began to sing, his voice imbued with a newfound tenderness, almost a prayer. Oh, I've had many trials, and I'd known some sorrow, but through it all, I've kept my faith in thee. Tom joined in immediately, his voice intertwining with Elvis's, finding a harmony that was both comforting and profoundly moving. The guitar added a simple yet deeply effective backdrop, lending a warmth and intimacy that had been absent from their earlier, purely a cappella performances. As they moved through the verses, their voices swelled with emotion, a powerful blend of yearning and conviction. The sun outside was now sending shafts of pale light through the curtains, illuminating the room with a gentle golden hue. It felt symbolic, as if the dawn was blessing their sacred performance. They sang of trials and tribulations, but also of the unwavering promise of peace. Their voices, tired but resolute, seemed to draw strength from the very air, from the spiritual energy that still vibrated in the room. Then, without speaking a word, they transitioned backling to another hymn, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot." The tempo picked up slightly, a gentle rhythmic sway. Their voices took on a renewed energy, full of hopeful anticipation. Elvis's guitar strummed a simple, soulful rhythm, providing a steady pulse. Tom found himself closing his eyes, letting the music carry him. He could feel Elvis's presence beside him, the power of his voice, the shared breath, the unspoken understanding. It was a magical synergy, two distinct voices becoming one glorious sound. They built to a crescendo, their voices rising with a joyous intensity, reaching for the heavens. The last notes of "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot" hummed in the air, a testament to their shared spiritual journey. But they weren't done. With the sun now truly breaking through the horizon, painting the sky with vibrant oranges and purples, Elvis leaned into the microphone, his voice resonating with a final, overwhelming surge of power. He started to sing "How Great Thou Art" again, but this time it was different. It was a full-throated, glorious explosion of sound. Tom responded instantly, matching his intensity. Their voices intertwining in a final, majestic declaration of faith. This wasn't the hesitant beginning. This was a powerful, triumphant affirmation. They poured every ounce of remaining energy, every shred of their souls into these final notes. Guitar was forgotten. It was just their voices, pure and unadulterated, reaching for the divine. The sound engineers monitoring from their separate room were frozen, their eyes wide with awe. They had witnessed the entire night unfold, but this final surge of power was something else entirely. They knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that they were recording something truly monumental, something that transcended music and entered the realm of the sacred. The recording equipment, meticulously set up, silently captured every vibration, every tremor of emotion, preserving this extraordinary moment for all time. The final "How Great Thou Art" soared powerful and majestic, filling the room, pushing against the walls, seeming to reach out beyond the house itself into the dawning Vegas sky. It was a climax of pure, unadulterated spiritual fervor, a sound that would forever be etched into the very fabric of the tapes. And then, as the first golden rays of the sun streamed fully into the room, bathing them in light, the last note faded slowly, beautifully into the profound silence of a brand new day. The silence that followed the last lingering note was immense, profound, almost sacred. It wasn't an empty silence, but one pregnant with the echoes of their combined voices, still vibrating in the air, in the very molecules of the room. Tom and Elvis stood there, bathed in the gentle golden light of the rising sun, their chests heaving, their bodies exhausted, but their spirits soaring. Neither spoke for a long moment. There was no need for words. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, Tom saw a reflection of his own feelings, deep satisfaction, overwhelming spiritual fulfillment, and a quiet awe at what they had just created. Elvis's eyes, usually restless, were now calm, luminous, filled with a deep sense of peace. A soft, knowing smile touched Elvis's lips. "Man," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "I never felt anything like that. Not ever." Tom simply nodded, unable to articulate the depth of his own experience. He felt cleansed, renewed, as if he had undergone a purification. All the pressures, the demands of his celebrity had been shed, leaving only the pure essence of his musical soul. He had connected with Elvis not as a rival or a fellow superstar, but as a brother in spirit, bound by the universal language of faith and music. Elvis walked slowly over to the stereo equipment, where the recording deck had been running silently all night. He reached out and gently pressed the stop button. the reels came to a halt. He then carefully unspooled the tape, holding it in his hands as if it were the most fragile, precious thing in the world. He turned back to Tom, holding the reel of tape up between them. "This," he said, his voice imbued with reverence. "This is something special, Tom. Something truly special." His eyes met Tom's. "This ain't for the world to hear. Not really. Not like this. This is for us. For the feeling we found here tonight." Tom understood instantly. This wasn't a commercial recording. This wasn't for release on an album or for public consumption. This was a private testament, a captured moment of spiritual transcendence that belonged only to them. To release it would be to strip it of its sacredness, to make it just another product. This was their holy grail, not for its monetary value or fame, but for its pure, unadulterated soul. "I agree, Elvis," Tom said, his voice soft but firm. "This is too precious. For all that, it's ours." Elvis gave a slow, deliberate nod. "It'll be kept safe always, just knowing it exists. That's enough, ain't it?" Tom smiled. "More than enough." They stood for another moment just looking at the tape, then at each other, the unspoken promise hanging in the air. The sun was now fully risen, its golden light flooding the room, chasing away the last vestiges of night. The world outside was waking up, but here, in this quiet room, a different kind of dawn had arrived. Joe Esposito appeared in the doorway, his face showing a mix of weariness and quiet awe. He hadn't been in the room, but he had obviously been listening from the sound booth, just as spellbound as his engineers. "Morning, Mr. Presley. Breakfast is being prepared if you'd like." Elvis turned to Joe, a rare, gentle smile on his face. "Thanks, Joe. We'll be out in a bit." He looked at Tom. "You hungry, Tom?" "Famished," Tom admitted, a low chuckle escaping him. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, replaced by the natural hunger and tiredness of a night spent in intense, soulful creation. They walked out of the room together, leaving the hallowed space behind them. The house now felt lighter, brighter, filled with the warmth of the morning sun. The air was still infused with the lingering echoes of their music, a silent witness to the extraordinary night that had unfolded. As they sat down to a late breakfast, surrounded by the usual quiet activity of Elvis's inner circle, their conversation was light, easy. They talked about mundane things, about the weather, about their upcoming shows, but beneath the surface a profound change had occurred. A bond had been forged, an invisible connection that only they shared. The Holy Grail recording, carefully put away, became a silent legend between them, a shared secret. It was not just a collection of songs, it was a testament to a night when two musical titans, usually bound by the demands of fame, had found common ground in the most sacred of music, singing their hearts out until dawn, creating something truly immortal, meant only for the echoes in their souls. As the sun climbed higher into the Nevada sky, signaling the full arrival of a new day, Tom Jones prepared to leave Elvis Presley's secluded retreat. The night had passed in a blur of raw emotion and pure, unadulterated music, leaving him both utterly exhausted and profoundly exhilarated. Elvis walked him to the limousine, his arm around Tom's shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie that felt both natural and deeply significant. There was no need for grand statements or promises. Everything that needed to be said had been sung. "Thank you for coming, for sharing your voice. It meant everything." "Elvis," Tom replied, meeting his gaze. "Thank you for inviting me. It was an honor, a true privilege. I'll never forget it." They shook hands, a firm, lingering clasp that spoke volumes. Then Tom got into the limousine, and with a quiet wave from Elvis, the car pulled away, heading back towards the bright lights and bustling energy of the Strip. As the house faded from view, Tom leaned back in the seat, closing his eyes. The memories of the night were vivid, playing like a private concert in his mind. The way Elvis's voice had intertwined with his, the raw emotion, the spiritual energy that had filled the room. It was more than just a musical collaboration. It was a shared spiritual experience that had touched him deeply. Back in his own suite, the familiar opulence felt different now. The glittering world of Vegas seemed a little less important, a little more fragile after the profound depths he had explored through gospel music with Elvis. He knew instinctively that this night would forever change the way he approached his music, his faith, and his life. The Holy Grail, recording as Elvis had called it, became a whispered legend in the music world over the years. Rumors would circulate occasionally. Did you hear about that gospel session Elvis and Tom did? Was there really a tape? But no one outside their trusted inner circles ever confirmed it. And the recording itself was never released. Why? For Tom, and he believed for Elvis, it was simple. Some things are too sacred for the marketplace. The raw, intimate, soul-bearing honesty of that night wasn't meant for public consumption, for critics to dissect or for fans to clamor over. It was a personal testament, a captured moment of spiritual transcendence. To release it would have been to diminish its power, to commercialize something that was truly divine. It was a secret treasure, a memory that would warm their hearts and nourish their souls in the quiet hours. Their friendship, though not outwardly demonstrative in the years that followed, was cemented by that night. When their paths crossed again, there was always an unspoken understanding in their eyes, a shared secret that bound them. They were fellow pilgrims on a spiritual journey, forever linked by the gospel songs sung until dawn. Elvis continued to record gospel music, finding solace and strength in it just as Tom continued to sing with his characteristic power, and so often infusing his pop performances with a gospel-like fervor. The essence of that night lived on in their music, even if the actual recording remained unheard by the masses. The legacy of that dawn session wasn't found on a record shelf, but in the echoes of their voices, in the hearts of those who knew of its existence, and in the profound impact it had on both men. It was a reminder that even the biggest stars, burdened by the weight of fame, still yearn for something pure, something real, something that connects them to a higher purpose. And sometimes, in the quietest hours, when the world was still, Tom would hum a hymn. And he would hear not just his own voice, but Elvis's "A Lot Sure" by the music, the feeling, the connection. It was all still there, lingering. A beautiful, heartwarming promise that some melodies, like some bombs, are truly eternal.